in the meeting, I discovered that there has been possibly some feedback from Conservation, where it's fair for me to tell you that last Thursday, we were before the Yarmouth Conservation Commission, and they were reviewing this project, and the primary issues that they had that we came away with were landscaping issues having to do with a pergola and a patio.
Well, let me interrupt you
Yeah,
just for a minute, because you are unfortunately now aware of the conservation needing some time to look at this. By unfortunate, I mean
Absolutely.
you just found out about it, apparently. And before we do a substantive discussion about the petition this evening, just so we're fair to whoever might next sit on this, in the event that we have to continue it this evening, so they don't have to watch a long video.
Understood.
And then come in and certify that they've actually viewed that video and hear it. It is going to be necessary for us, in order to give complete consideration to this petition, to have the Conservation make its final ruling. So you know that.
That's not uncommon, and it's just coming to me tonight. And so if
No
your
fault
wish,
to you.
if your wish is that we leave testimony and continue for 2 weeks, I think we're going to be agreeing to that.
Yeah, I'm not sure that, do we have a calendar?
Yes.
I can't tell you for sure that it's 2 weeks. Let me just take a look.
I'm
okay?
concerned from what I heard about the schedule that it couldn't be either, but we'll see what you say.
Is that what Ms. Clark told you?
Well,
It could be 2 weeks?
We were concerned that the meeting following this one is full.
Right, that one is closed.
All right.
25th, Mr. Chairman.
But the 8th.
November 8th?
Yeah, the 8th, or the 22nd, no, just the 8th.
When's your next meeting is?
No, we have a meeting every, twice monthly, but we already have filled up calendars for
25th.
The 8th. I'm sorry, for
October
the
25 is
Yeah.
closed. Our next regular meeting would then be November 8.
Well, if it is your policy, and I can't predict the outcome of the conservation process. As I said, it was mostly landscaping and extent of the site alteration, but
Yeah.
I don't want to put your group into an awkward position. I know this, Great Island is trying to, they have a schedule for construction, and we're trying to
Sure.
get things going as early in the season as possible.
Sure, but I'm going to speak for myself, and you can take a poll of this board if you'd like, but there is no way I'm going to vote favorably on this petition unless I have all the feedback that Conservation wishes to provide us.
Well, that's all we need, I think.
Does anybody else feel similarly? or-
Yes, I would concur.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I think it's in your
Well, there's no
petition's
question.
best interest,
We'd
but that's
request-
up to you.
Well, if we cannot fit into the 25th, then we'd like to request a continuation to November 8th.
All right, that's the best I think we could do for you, unfortunately, because we do have a full agenda. But you'd be, right now, it looks like you're going to be good to go, and you won't have to put up with me, because I'll be down in Aruba that particular day.
Well, I think I'm sorry to hear that, actually, 'cause you're a good chairman.
All right, so if you would agree, would you like us then to continue it over
Yes,
to the 8th,
please.
knowing we won't favorably vote on it this evening? And so at your request, of the petitioner's request, does anybody care to make a motion to agree to the request to continue it?
I'll move that we move the request to extend petition number 4775 for a period of
Well, to November 8th.
November 8th. I'm sorry.
And that would be with the condition that the petitioner sign an extension agreement, is
That's
that
correct.
right?
Yep.
And is there a second to that?
Second on that, Mr. Chairman.
And Mr. Niconello seconds on that motion. So made and seconded. Does the board care to have any discussion before proceeding to a vote? And hearing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. That carries unanimously, subject to your execution of this document, okay?
Would you like us to sign it now, or send
Yes,
it?
oh, yeah, please.
Well, I appreciate finding out about it, even though it's kind of late, but we are here. so-
Yeah, unfortunately, we found out about it just as you did, probably. So I just need just the applicant petitioner agreeing that it's going to go over to November 8th. Yeah, no, that's okay. You just sign your name. We know who you are.
Great, and you'll fill that in.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Well, thank you for being so cooperative with the discussion. And we look forward to, well, the rest of the board looks forward to hearing you that day. That brings us to petition number 4772, that of 161 Main Street, Building 1 Condominium Trust. Trustees of that condominium, of that trust are,
His map, he's walking out.
oh, without your map, sir. Your map is here. Richard P. Morse and Betsy Newell, trustees of the Morse Family Trust, and Alfred Blue, trustee of the Bayview Realty Trust, concerning property located at 161 Route 6A in Yarmouthport. That property is in a zoning district B1. Our applicant this evening is seeking to modify an existing zoning Board of Appeals decision to allow a residential dwelling unit. Good evening, and would you identify yourself for all the people at home listening so rapidly to our meeting this evening?
Good evening. For the record, my name is Andrew Singer. I'm an attorney in Dennisport, here representing the applicant and the owner, and with me is Richard Morse, who is one of the trustees of the condominium. This property is...
By the way, good evening, Mr. Morse.
Good evening, how are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
This property, the condominium is it's probably most well-known for the building in the back, which is Jack's Outback 2. So just to orient you, it's that property when you go in the driveway. The building we're talking about is the building right on the right. That's Building 1, and in the back is Building 2 of the condominium. And this application is dealing just with Unit A, which is the one unit on the 3rd floor of Building 1 out front. The reason why we're here is I've been working, as you saw in the summary that I submitted to you, we've been working closely with Mark Grills and the Health Department. There are some questions that had come up about the residential apartment that's been in Unit 3 since 1991. There's been an apartment up there for a long time. There were some repairs and fixes that needed to be done from a building and health point of view, which have been done. But then there was a question about the use itself. And so we went back and started digging in the zoning history of the property. It's pre-existing, non-conforming, the two buildings, the size, everything. In 1986, 87, the owners were before you seeking to authorize relief to allow the buildings to stay where they were, within the setbacks, the driveway. Obviously, it encroaches all over on the setbacks. And that was granted. There was a condition in that decision that said that, excuse me, any future changes in use will necessitate further appeals to this board. So this is in 86, 87. In 88, they came back and you approved the creation of a condominium on the property. At that point, there was one unit in Building 1 and one unit in Building 2. There were one condominium unit. There were actually in Building 2, there were two separate subunits. So that was in 1989 when that was, 1988 when that was granted. Now in that decision, the board, and you should have copies of all these, in that decision the board said that prior to any change in occupancy of any unit, the prospective occupant shall present to the fire department and the health department a list of hazardous materials, get permits. So that's 1988. In 1990, 1991, the then owners, and I have an affidavit from one of them who could not be here tonight, wanted to convert the office on the 3rd floor to an apartment. So they went to the building department and the health department and completed the process to have an apartment up there. You have some, there's an email from the health department and talking about the history. They talked about the fact that, I think it was Dan Ojala, provided a plan or a letter back in '94 talking about the septic system and the apartment use.
Dan Ojala?
I believe so.
Wow.
I thought it was, I don't have the email right in front of me, but I thought that's what I read. It's in your file. It was, okay. So they obtained the permits that they needed back then. Now, and you've seen this issue before, 27 years goes by, and now the question is was all the relief that was needed for that Unit A on the 3rd floor to become residential granted? If you look at the 1986-87 decision, you could say no, because they didn't come back to the Board of Appeals. But if you look at the 1988 decision, you could say yes, they went to the health and building departments and got the permits. I sat with Mr. Grills, current building commissioner, and we went through every single piece of paper in the file, which is interesting because you guys have digitized it all. So we were just scrolling through it on his computer. Everything was in there. Could not locate, and this is not surprising, it's 3 decades later, could not locate the actual building permit that was issued or the other permits. There was pieces here and there, like the letter that talks about the septic being looked at for bedroom uses and things like that. But there was nothing clear that said, they did this, this was granted. So out of an abundance of caution, what Mr. Grills suggested we do is we come back before you tonight. And so what I applied for you for, very straightforwardly, jumping all the way back to the 1986-87 special permit, is just to amend that to allow the continued use of Unit A as an apartment as it's been for 27 years. If you felt that it wasn't necessary because of the 1988 special permit, then we could talk about that, because I want to make sure that the building commissioner is satisfied and happy. As far as the relief itself, allowing to the extent necessary that's needed the apartment to continue, I submit that it's not detrimental, substantially more detrimental, or any issue that would derogate from the zoning bylaw. The residential use is allowed in this zoning district. There are no changes proposed for the property. This is a straightforward use question. The building, the site, everything is as it is. It's not changing. So it's literally just to allow this use. So no change in traffic flow, no change in septic flow, stormwater, drainage, you name it, everything stays the same. I did speak with the health department this afternoon following up on the email that you received, and they have issued a rental permit good through the end of this year for that unit, subject to your resolving the relief with you, and they want a final inspection before it's reoccupied. It has been occupied either by the owner or by a tenant for almost every year. I think it's just been vacant recently as this has been working through the process. Is that correct?
Yep.
With that, we're happy to answer any questions that you have. It was something that, to the extent it needed relief 30 years ago, they should have come back. But then, when they did come back for the condominium, I think they probably assumed that everything was okay when they went to the town. With that, I have plans, I have that affidavit from the prior owner, and I have the decision. So if you have any questions, we'd be happy to try and answer them.
Are those things that you wanted to pass in this evening, or?
The decisions you should have.
Oh, we have those, sure,
The
yeah.
affidavit, I can certainly, for the record, I could give you one. It's from
Well, since you made reference.
Stephen
to it,
Fideli.
take it, sure.
Steve Fideli, who was one of the owners. He's the one who actually met with Forrest White and was doing all the work with the building department at that time. And so this is just an affidavit that
Well,
follows
there's
up.
a lot of well-known names here. I see back in '86, Mr. Morse appeared, and along with him was Ed Teague.
Jack's out back.
So we're going to mark that as an Exhibit A, okay?
Sure, thank you.
A lot of names,
Yeah,
Mr.
23 years.
Yeah, it says
A lot of names familiar to this town.
That and this one
Absolutely.
read exactly the same.
Yeah.
And let me pass this around. Mr. Aaron, do you have any questions of our petitioner this evening?
Just one, from the plan that was submitted, if this is a dwelling unit, is there a kitchen or kitchen facilities?
There is, yes.
And where is it in the?
I don't see a bathroom or a toilet area.
Yeah, what?
No, this is the unit plan from the condominium deed. That's why. It's the unit plan. That's why it doesn't show all of the, layout of the area. It's a one-bedroom apartment. Do you know where the kitchen is?
Yeah, the kitchen.
It's not intended to be a floor plan, is that what you're saying?
Correct. Correct. It was the one wall plan we had that, we had from the condominium deed.
That's the only question I have.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Nicanello?
Yes, thank you. Well, I look at the field card, and the field card said it has no bathrooms, and it says the upper story is finished. So I understand it's been such a ordeal for the last number of years for the paperwork to catch up what's going on, but it still says there's nothing upstairs, but it's finished.
It is finished, yes.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's been finished
No, I understand.
It was an
It's just, for
Well-
some reason, the paper was never caught up to what happened.
What I think would make sense is, if you grant the approval as needed, then suggest that the owner
Right.
just goes into the assessor's office
Oh,
to make sure
absolutely.
they
Yeah.
have,
Yeah.
make sure they update that so it has what it's been.
So in 1989, when you finally got all that building permit and health permit, it was never adjusted at that time. And they've been,
building has-
assessing it for less than what it's worth, I guess.
Well, the building has 9 units in it. 8 of them are commercial, and you got this one that's residential. And then you got the units in the back, which are separate ownership.
Yeah. And the history on the building permit record is, well, it starts from 1990, where it says an addition, 94 was an interior, and then some roofing in 2005. So, I have no other questions, Mr. Chairman, I'm just trying to sort it out.
Very good. Mr. Martin?
Excuse me.
Well, I think it's really just a question of getting something corrected that everybody thought was okay anyways, and it's been there, and may not even need correction for that matter. Been there for a long time, had been at least semi-previously approved, and apparently it meets all the requirements now in terms of fire access and egress and the second egress, and
Yes, certain, the stairs have been repaired, and there was a light in the hallway that needed to be, the health department still, and the building department still want to go out and do one final inspection, but yes, they've been repaired.
okay, I have no other issue.
Ms. Britta?
Just 2 questions. When you spoke to the building inspector, did he have a preference as to which to go back and amend the earlier one, or you mentioned you had come
We didn't discuss that specifically. What I would suggest is,
back to the organic one?
Why not amend both?
I'd bet both. Because the condominium one, you don't want to miss the condominium one, because that's crucial to how it's structured now. I'd say both. And I think it has a new number now anyway, so the way it would be recorded would be under the new number, amending condition, or the decision 2371 and 2587.
And then the other units in that building are strictly commercial? There's no other living accommodation? No one's living in any of those other units?
Not in Building 1. There is an apartment in Building 2, but in Building 1, no.
It's all commercial plus the
Correct.
condo?
Correct.
Okay, that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Well, the good news is that with, if we give you this approval this evening, the tax rate will, the taxes paid by this property are likely to go up, and that's always a wonderful thing for the town of Yarmouth. We enjoy collecting taxes to make it
I
a
wonder if
better
the owner
town.
of the unit's listening to this meeting at the moment.
The apartment unit will be cheaper than the commercial, is that what you're saying?
I don't know.
Just out of
Look,
curiosity,
I
could
think it's just, particularly when you read the 2 decisions in tandem and as so close together, to me, it just appears like an unfortunate oversight that it wasn't clearly defined when it was converted to condominium ownership as a, recognizing it as a residential unit.
Well, it wasn't residential at that time.
Oh, okay.
You know, in 1988, it was still commercial.
Okay.
It was converted in 91. So there was a gap there, and then reading the decision conditions, that's.
Well, you were the owner back in 91, right?
Was, yeah.
And I know you to be a man of great integrity. Can you tell me that when the work was done, that a building permit was obtained?
That was my office, and I moved out in 91, so
Yeah.
it was about that time that Steve Fidelli does anyone know Dennis McWilliams, a builder? That's who the builder was he thought he worked with. I couldn't find him. But we had to do a lot of things, put fire extinguishers in, lights, so around 91.
You have inspections as well?
When the second master deed went on record, it lists the unit as a residential unit. Do you know the date of that?
That was 2005.
Oh, not till 2000.
Yeah, it was later when that went on. But Mr. Fidelli in his affidavit does address that in paragraph 3. That he says, "I have a distinct memory that I obtained all necessary permits and approvals from the town of Yarmouth relative to this conversion. I worked at the time with Forrest White and others."
Well,
Just ask, I'm curious, what is it assessed at now? Would you know by looking at that card? I'm just curious. I just figured if that information was there.
think what's in
They
here may
assessed
not be
these
everything
units
that's
pretty-
there.
Pretty well.
Yeah,
But we can take a look at that.
I actually thought the card was pretty, was fairly,
What's here is a number of different, a couple of the different units.
Very
I'm not sure
minor
it's every- I'm not
things.
sure it's everything.
Only if
Yeah.
it was easy. I
Yeah.
just-
I'm not in that business, I just know that
Yeah.
it's not,
you know, Vision Quest should be checking that. I know they come into my basement, it seems like every time they're doing a reassessment. I want to see if I've added any bedrooms.
It's a unique building, because there's 3 floors and 9 units, you know, there's
Right.
not just one card. You know, there's a whole
that's why
stack of
it's,
them.
yeah. It's very,
Sure.
and-
All right, does anybody in our audience care to speak in favor of this petition? If so, please come to the lectern. Seeing none. Does anybody care to speak in opposition to this petition? If so, please come to the lectern. And seeing none, we now close it to the public's commentary on this petition and open it up to board discussion and deliberations. To me, it looks like it's just an unfortunate oversight back there in 87, 86, 87, 89. 88, was that the second one? 89?
88 was the second one.
That can be fairly easily rectified by just amending both petitions, I would suggest, to recognize that as now a residential unit.
Mr. Chairman, would we require a floor plan to go in the file?
Well, I think a floor plan would be a fairly easy thing to give on something this small. What's the total square footage
There is a floor plan there.
for this unit?
Well, no, there is this floor
Oh, I
plan I
didn't see a
submitted,
floor
but
plan.
it doesn't have, as Mr. Barron said, it
Yeah,
doesn't
this is-
show.
It's not- yeah,
That's
full.
part of the
This
condo.
wasn't intended as a floor plan.
No, it shows the size, though. The unit's 1,131 square feet.
But it doesn't show where everything is.
Correct, it doesn't label, as
I
you
mean,
said. yeah.
it doesn't have to be by an engineer. It could be by somebody with a CAD system, or maybe that old-fashioned thing called a ruler.
Well, and they could do it right on this.
Oh,
And we could ask the owner to do it and just
sure.
submit it to Sandy for the file.
Sure.
Show the bathroom and kitchen.
It doesn't have to be artistic, it just has to be accurate.
I think 2005 master.
And I'm confident Mr. Morse can handle that problem.
I think after 30 years, we should see what the inside looks like.
Sure. Not only that, I think the town should see what's there so that they can properly assess it as a residential unit. Again, I'm very concerned
We'll
about
submit that
everybody
for the
paying their
file.
taxes. So, anybody prepared to make a motion? And that would, I suggest, would be that we amend both petitions to reflect that we recognize that unit as a residential unit, subject to a floor plan being submitted to us.
So moved.
I'll second.
You got all that there, Mr. Singer?
Yes, wait, you mean
don't
you're not
wanna
going to ask
make it easy
Mr. Barry to draft a decision?
Yeah, no, you're drafting the decision.
That'll be fine. And I did get it, yes.
I've got arbitration hearings and trials all this month, for the rest of the month. So you can do it.
All right, let me ask, who made the motion?
I did.
Mr.
Okay.
Mr. Martin made the motion,
Who
was seconded
seconded?
by Mr. Nicanello.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
You need a spelling on his name?
No, I got it.
Okay,
Yeah,
it's right in front of him.
yeah, exactly.
All right, on that motion so made by Mr. Martin, seconded by Mr. Nicanello, does the board care to have any discussion before moving it along to a vote? All those in favor of that motion made, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. That carries unanimously.
Thank you very
We'll
much.
look forward to the receipt of the decision, the review of it, and then the filing of that with the town clerk's office. 20 days must elapse before that is considered a final decision. And please remember the condition that we need a floor plan.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, we have two very controversial matters coming up in front of us concerning cell towers. So who's ever going to be presenting concerning petitions 4773 and 4774, that of Celco Partnership DBA, otherwise known as Verizon Wireless, with a property location first at pole 2436 in, I'm not sure what I mean by this, in ROW. Can you tell me what that means?
Right of way.
What?
Right of way.
Oh, right of way. Nearest parcel to utility pole for reference only. That location generally is known as 210 Station Ave, South Yarmouth, Mass. That property is in an R40 zoning district. Our applicant is seeking a special permit under zoning bylaw 408 and use table 202.5 subsection F7 to attach a CRAN wireless equipment to an existing utility pole on a public right-of-way. Are there any distinct differences between this petition and the next petition in terms of the equipment?
No.
All right.
No.
So then I'm also going to suggest that we open for discussion and deliberation petition 4774, that of Selco Partnership, DBA Verizon Wireless, that property location that we're talking about for the same sort of equipment to be installed is at utility pole number 838-6 in right-of-way, nearest parcel to utility pole for reference only, of 47 Colburn Path, West Yarmouth, Mass. Again, that's to install a CRAN wireless equipment to a new utility pole and replacing the existing pole. Thank you. What would you like to tell us about your petitions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Peter Anderson from McLean Middleton Law Firm up in Manchester, New Hampshire. I'd like to start by mentioning with the Colburn Path site and mention that there is a pole, a replacement pole that's been installed, and it increased the height from 28 feet 6 inches to 38 feet 6 inches, and the top of the proposed cylinder that goes on top of that pole is 42 feet and 8 inches. And I just point out that under the zoning bylaw, section 408.7.6.5, that we don't have to seek any sort of a height variance if it doesn't exceed 20 feet. So we're within that 20-foot limitation.
Sure.
I just will point out that the equipment that will be mounted on the top of the Colburn Path site is a 38 by 12-inch cylinder that's painted, I call it Cape Cod gray, but it's light gray. And the reason we painted that color is because some towns like to have it brown, but you know, with seabirds and things like that down here, and if they go to the bathroom on brown, it tends to look very ugly over time. There's some auxiliary equipment to go along with the cylinder, and that auxiliary equipment is an electrical junction box with cables and remote radio heads. There's no lighting on the site, and no ground equipment on the site. So that's Colburn Path, and if you want to see a photo simulation of that, I believe if you look at tab 3 of the materials that we submitted with the application, and the second sheet is LE-2.
I'm sorry?
LE-2.
Okay.
There's a rendition that shows the equipment, and there's actually a picture of the pole.
All right.
All right. Do you want me to go, do you want to consider them together or separately?
I couldn't.
Do you want me to go right into the next one, or do you want to
Sure.
consider?
No, I think we ought to try and get them both.
All right. As far,
Because it's the same basic discussion.
right. The Station Ave site, this is a little bit different. It's a side-mounted antenna on the pole. I actually prefer the way that these look. Some people have their own preferences, but the top of the cylinder is 22 feet 6 inches above ground, and the top of the pole is 34 feet 6 inches. And again, if you look at sheet 2 of the plans that were submitted with that application, it shows the side mount. And the auxiliary equipment is the same for this site as it was for the Colburn Path site.
Pictures tell 1,000 words, don't they?
So before I ask our radio frequency engineer to come up and talk about the need for this, I just wanted to kind of recap the history of what we've done with these small cells. This board has approved 7 of these sites. One in 2017, which was it's down on the beach by the Smuggler's Inn. We have an electrical permit for that, and we're ready to go as soon as our sister company gives us an attachment license. It's internal, intra-company bureaucracy, I call it, that's holding that up. The other sites were just approved recently this year, and we're waiting for DOT permits because 2 of the sites are on Route 28 with State Highway, and 2 of them are on 6A, which is a state highway. So we can't begin until we get DOT permits for those, and those
The
are in the
people sitting
works.
down on the beaches are going to be happy, huh? They can actually talk on their cell phone.
Exactly,
We
exactly.
get internet access while they're there on the beach.
And then
Sundays.
students at the high school will be happy too, because there'll be 2 on Station Ave. There's 1 approved already on Station Ave, and this would be the second one. So with that, I'd like to call our engineer, Dan Brown, up.
You don't need any waivers on this, do you?
I think we requested some in here.
I'm just not seeing any. I apologize if I missed it.
Good evening. My name is Dan Brown, RF engineer with C-Squared Systems. We prepare the RF affidavit, emissions analysis, and coverage plots submitted with the application. I have with me the coverage plots. They should be similar to what you've seen in the past. The first plot shows the existing and approved 700 and 2100 megahertz LTE coverage in the targeted area of Yarmouth. The black symbols show the locations of the existing facilities. There's a water tank in the bottom left. Up towards the right corner is a lattice tower. And then the gray symbol locations and the pink are all approved facilities that have recently gone in front of you. We're on a high tension line to the north, the stealth flagpole behind the post office, and then recently a church steeple. The shaded green and yellow areas show where Verizon currently provides acceptable and reliable LTE service. So the 2 targeted sites are shown in the blue dots, Station Avenue site over here and the Colburn Ave site over here. As you can see, both facilities are located in areas that are currently lacking reliable service. The facility over by Colburn is far from any existing facilities, so it's lacking both 700 and 2100 megahertz LTE coverage. The Station Ave facility, while it's partially covered at the 700 coverage, is shown in green. It is lacking the AWS coverage, which is a second layer of the network used for additional capacity. As you're well aware, Station Avenue is highly traveled, and adjacent to it is the high school. In addition to providing the coverage improvement to the area, the small cells will also address insufficient network capacity by helping to provide a dedicated server to the users traveling or living or the adjacent residences to the area, and help offload the existing macro sites that are currently serving much of the area. Specifically, Verizon has identified to be heavy network traffic on the Yarmouth replacement facility, the beta and gamma sectors, highlighted in red and orange. And as you can see, the 2 small cells are strategically located in areas currently served by those facilities. So the small cells will essentially become a dedicated server and remove the traffic from those macro sites, freeing up resources to better serve users elsewhere. And
Sorry about the equipment.
no problem. In addition to the coverage plots, we also submitted radio frequency emission analysis and studies. In summary, the analysis shows that the Station Ave facility, which is the lower of the 2, at ground level is calculated to be less than 7% of the FCC's limit, so substantially within the limit. Similarly, the Colburn facility is actually much higher at a center line of around 41 feet, so the worst case exposure at ground level is calculated to be around 1.2% of the limit.
Very good. Don't leave quite yet.
Absolutely.
Maybe questions. Ms. Britta?
Just 2, and this is just general curiosity. You mentioned that one of them is a side mount and the other is a top mount. What is the difference between the 2?
Well, I'll let him
Pull the
speak.
mic in front of you if you would.
Sorry. I'll let our radio frequency engineer speak to that, but I think it has to do with height, whereas we need to be higher on some poles for it to be effective. We don't need to be as high on other poles. Is that essentially right?
Is that it?
That's correct. From an RF standpoint, the ideal location is up on top of the utility pole, better line of sight, and just a bigger coverage footprint in general. But where the location on the pole is largely dictated by the utility company. On Station Ave, it's a relatively busy pole, and the only available location is halfway up the pole and maintaining clearance from the secondary and primary powers.
Okay, so there's no programmatic difference at all? They all do the same thing regardless of where they're mounted?
Yes.
Okay, that's Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Martin?
I have no questions. We've done this before, and serving a need within the community that we all would like to see accomplished. So, and it's very innocuous, and nobody seems to be too upset about anything. So, neither am I.
Mr. Nicanello?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Darrell Lynn with a question. Is this our first side-mounted in town? I don't remember seeing the side-mounted before.
I think we had another side mounted in the last batch that we did.
How high is that up from the ground?
This one?
Yeah.
I
Is that
think-
somewhere someone can go and fiddle with if they wanted to?
No, it's 22 feet, 7 inches.
22 feet, is that what it was? Because it sure doesn't look like that in the picture.
Well, it's on the plans, it's reflected it.
Yeah.
It's about 12 feet from the top of the pole,
The side mount?
the side mount.
12 feet.
Well, I guess somebody could climb 22 feet if they were so inclined.
And I believe it is higher than some of the existing equipment on the pole.
Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you, sir. Mr. Barron?
Yes, I'm looking at the map and wondering why we need another one on Station Ave. It must be your competition that put that other repeater just a little further north.
Right here.
Yeah. Could you comment on why you need a second one on Station Ave?
Absolutely. Yeah, that first facility is Verizon. It's not by a competitor. The gap is essentially too large to be improved for a single small cell to improve the area. Small cells in general, you're only looking, under best case conditions such as a wide open straight street like Station Ave, maybe up to a quarter-mile radius. That second facility to the north is a half a mile away. So the two will hand off well together, essentially meeting up at the halfway point, which is approximately at the entrance to the elementary school. It's unfortunate they weren't zoned at the same time.
If we had approved the other location for Verizon, why wasn't that able to carry the signal in that area?
So the coverage area of each small cell is highly dependent upon the surrounding clutter, such as the homes and the trees. And in this case, it's going to cover very well up and down Station Avenue, but it's going to fade out just due to the physics behind the signal propagating. The small cells are designed to support Verizon's high band frequency licenses. They're 1900 and 2100 megahertz licenses.
Okay.
They just don't propagate as far as a lower frequency or on a macro site that's well above the trees.
All right, could you flip the sheet and show us the coverage area again with the new installation? Okay, I see what you're getting at.
Yep.
I see
So
what you're
these
getting
two small cells, in addition to that coverage plot or the coverage gap filling that you saw in the previous plot, it's intended to help offload the sectors highlighted in red and orange. And as you can see, it's a fairly substantial area. In addition, you have two small cells. We have two schools in the area. It's heavy network traffic, so it's just additional capacity in general.
You mean the elementary has a big load on the system? Okay, a little bit of a side question. You mentioned the primary site and the church steeple. That is your site, or is that Verizon's?
The church steeple is Verizon as well.
Okay.
That was-
Nothing further.
So I just want to know now, will we have an actual 100% coverage around the United States when you complete this project? Or is that still a figment of our imagination?
It's an ongoing development.
I see. Then how do we call it 100%, though? I'm always interested in that. When I see they're telling me they have the best coverage, this company tells me they got the best coverage, that company tells me, and everybody tells me it's 100% coverage, but it apparently isn't. In any event, that's kind of an esoteric question, and I don't expect you to answer it, but I am going to say that there was a review of these requests from the health department, and the comments. I didn't see any differences in them. The Health Department wants to point out that that this proposal will, one, provide no auxiliary power sources such as generators. That's true?
That's correct.
There will be no auxiliary fuel sources because there'll be no generating capacity, such as diesel or propane. There'll be no short-term bridging power components such as batteries or capacitors. Is that true?
Well, there's an electrical junction box, but there's not, if you're talking about leaking
No,
batteries.
they're speaking about bridging components
No.
to batteries.
No.
Okay, so there's no battery backup necessarily on these. Okay. No bridging components containing hazardous materials such as electrolyte solutions are to be considered in this, are they?
No.
Good. No toxic or hazardous materials of any kind are included in your request. Is that fair to say?
It's fair.
The radio frequency report includes projections that are all below the maximum permissible exposure limits, that's determined by the FCC. An actual RF study with field measurements will be conducted. Hasn't it already been conducted?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. For each of these completed installations, I see what they're saying, that you're going to actually do a follow-up once the stations are online. And that's normal within the course.
Well, that was a condition of the last round of
Yeah.
special permits.
But it's also a health condition,
Right,
a health
okay.
department condition here, so we would make that, we would want to see that in a draft decision.
Okay.
They go on to say that these need to be inspected at least every 24 months, and that the town may retain a technical inspector in the field of RF engineering at the expense of the carrier to verify the inspection report. The RF field study post the installation should be filed with this board and also with the health department, okay? I know you've done one in anticipation of the installations, but now, in follow-up to that, file the study with us, please, and that would be a condition of any grant of approval here this evening. All right. I have no questions for you. I do note that since there's no one else in our audience, there is no one that is intending to speak either in favor or against this petition. And so we now close it to the public commentary on the petition and open it up to board discussions and deliberations, recognizing that the health, well, first of all, I think it's incumbent upon us to note that you meet all the criteria of the bylaw in your presentation. You're not requesting any waivers.
Two waivers.
I'm sorry.
And one is, if the application is for a personal wireless facility, a town map showing other existing personal wireless service facilities in the town and outside the town within 1 mile of its corporate limits. I think we've requested a waiver on that, but I think that does it right there, essentially.
Well, it certainly does it for your installations, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And,
But sure, it tells us all the installations in town, because as you know, you do have
Correct.
competitors, and they have antennas going up everywhere.
But
That's not a
it's
bad thing, though.
But it does say, for us, I believe.
Okay. So if you need a waiver for that, it seems a small thing. What's the second waiver?
The other one deals with all existing and future facilities in the town and we don't really, I can't give you, I don't know what we're going to be coming up with next year. They haven't come up with that yet for, future installations.
Sure.
So it's difficult for me to do that, so we would request a waiver for that provision.
Sure, that seems reasonable to me, but I mean, the rest of, I'm only one of 5 board members, so. All right. Recognizing that
I was going to say,
only if you have a need.
I was going to say the RF affidavit does list Verizon's existing facilities within town.
Oh, it does?
On maps,
Sure.
coordinates, and addresses.
Sure, good. Good, so that would kind of take care of that issue that we first discussed. All right, well, does anybody care to have any discussion on the board before perhaps considering a motion? And is anybody prepared to make a motion that should reflect that the relief as granted would be granted subject to an RF post-installation study and approval of the 2 waiver requests, which seem pretty benign to me, but I leave it to everybody.
Mr. Chairman, I move the petition 4773 and 4774 under the conditions that you listed and we have discussed here at the meeting.
Okay, now, you second on both as well? Now, I just want to point out that we're going to take these one at a time, even though that was done as a joint, no, I don't think it's necessary. I mean, you're moving on the both petitions, is that fair to say?
Yes.
All right, so we have Barron and...
So it was
Nicanello.
determined there was no RF field study required, or necessary, I should say. You've already, I know the health office was asking maybe we should make this subject to an RF field study, but you were saying that essentially exists based on other...
Well, we have an RF report showing a gap in coverage. They want like an as-built study, and that's a condition that we're going to put into the
It is, okay.
decision.
All right.
Well, one of the conditions we just spoke of, and you should be taking notes because I'll be looking forward to a
He's
draft
gonna-
decision from you, is that a post-installation RF field study will be provided to this board,
Correct.
and that you will comply with all the requirements of the town of Board of Health. Is that something you wanted in that same condition, Mr. Barron and Mr.
Yes, I
Nicanello?
amend my petition.
Yeah. You know, we have very little say over these things, but we do want to make sure what we say is heard loudly.
Yes. It will be in the,
Anybody else care to have any discussion on the motions before proceeding to a vote? And hearing none, all those in favor of the motion made, and petition 4773 by Mr. Barron, seconded by Mr. Nicanello with the stated conditions, please indicate by saying aye if you are in favor. Aye. That carries unanimously. The same motion has been made by Mr. Barron and seconded by Mr. Nicanello on petition 4774 to grant the requested relief subject to the conditions we have discussed and with the requested waivers. Does the board care to have any further discussion on that motion before proceeding? And hearing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. That carries unanimously. Of course, 20 days must elapse after these are filed with the town clerk's office before they are considered final. You must file these special permits, record them at the Barnstable Registry of Deeds, and return proof of recordation back to our board secretary, Ms. Clark. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming all the way down from New Hampshire, right?
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank
Well,
you.
we welcome you here every time you come.
Well, my parents live in Brewster, so,
Oh, so do you get to see them?
yes.
Good for you. What a dedicated son.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Made and so moved and so voted. Good night to all. Thank you. Thank you for coming all the way down, and you're very appropriate.